Today we are going to make a series of documentary videos from Cyan and Joy and get popcorn. Let's have a marathon with several videos that are on the channel. Thank you for coming here. Enjoy our content. Enjoy below in the comments. Sign up now on Temu and get an exclusive discount. Don't wait. When you register today, you'll receive a special discount coupon to use on your purchases. Take advantage of amazing deals and save in.
On December 7, 1941, Japan launched a surprise attack on the United States, destroying a significant portion of the American fleet anchored at Pearl Harbor. This catastrophic event caught the U.S. off guard, as the American intelligence services were unable to foresee the attack, and even more concerning, the FBI had disregarded warnings from a Soviet double agent about the impending operation. When Harry Truman moved into the White House, he quickly learned the hard lesson from the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor. Determined to prevent such a disaster from happening again, Truman decided to establish the CIA, which was a blow to the FBI and its powerful director, J. Edgar Hoover, as they lost their authority over strategic intelligence matters. This troubling story began in the 1940s. Truman informed Hoover that he was removing the FBI's responsibility for foreign espionage. Truman was adamant that the CIA should not become an extension of the FBI, nor did he want the two agencies to merge into a single organization, which reminded him of the Gestapo in Nazi Germany. Truman reluctantly created the CIA, much to Hoover's despair. The CIA's headquarters was established in Langley, Virginia, about 20 kilometers from Washington, D.C. This fortress-like complex employs around 16,000 people. The CIA is exempt from disclosing its budget, organizational structure, the names and roles of its personnel, their salaries, or even the number of employees. As a result, the figures that circulate about the agency are often highly speculative. What is known is that the number of CIA employees has grown from 35 at its inception to around 10,000 today, and its budget has increased from a few $100,000 to approximately $28 billion. The CIA is responsible for counterintelligence abroad but is prohibited from operating within the United States, a territory reserved for the FBI. Truman placed the CIA directly under the authority of the President of the United States. However, the agency quickly evolved beyond its original mandate, becoming the primary service for conducting clandestine special activities and subversive operations overseas. The CIA's statutes were clear at its creation. Its mission was to collect, classify, coordinate, and evaluate intelligence, intervening in situations where diplomacy was insufficient and military action was not advisable. The agency was born in the Cold War era with a singular focus: to predict when, how, and where the Soviet Union might strike against the United States. The CIA was created specifically for this purpose after the Pearl Harbor attack and the failure of U.S. intelligence services. From the early 1950s to the late 1980s, the CIA's primary mission was to uncover the plans and intentions of the Politburo in Moscow. However, a fundamental mistake was made from the outset, concentrating nearly all of the agency's resources on what was deemed the primary target, the Soviet Union. This focus led to American intelligence services, including the CIA, dedicating between 55% and 60% of their budgets to countering the Soviet threat. The CIA and other U.S. intelligence services were tasked with opposing the Soviets wherever they were active, whether in Angola, the Congo, Afghanistan, or Iran. This was a long, covert war, fought across various global hotspots, lasting for years. Infiltrating enemy organizations or recruiting one of their agents was seen as the best way to discover the adversary's intentions, and the CIA rigorously adhered to these methods. However, the agency made another grave mistake early on by attempting to bring as many former Nazis as possible to the U.S. In 1943, Allen Dulles, the future director of the CIA, went to Switzerland to initiate secret negotiations with Nazi leaders. There had already been contact with General Reinhard Gehlen, head of Hitler's intelligence services, as well as with war criminals like Otto von Bolschwing and Klaus Barbie. The CIA hired these individuals after the war ended, driven by the belief that retaining German intelligence assets was crucial. Dulles, a Wall Street lawyer whose primary client was Standard Oil, a company that had conducted business with the Nazis during the war, played a key role in this process. The US became infested with former Nazis after World War II as part of an effort to capture German expertise. This was the first significant error. The second mistake was believing that the US could successfully intervene in foreign affairs and overthrow governments using money and influence. In 1953, during the height of the Cold War, Allen Dulles was appointed as the director of the CIA. Under his leadership, the agency's special and covert operations proliferated. Looking back at operations conducted in Guatemala, Hungary, Berlin, Vietnam, and Chile, we can see a pattern of repeated methods used again and again. The CIA organized numerous clandestine operations, in part because no other service could compete with them in this area. Moreover, American presidents quickly realized that they could utilize this secret weapon without having to explain or be accountable to the public. Over time, the situation evolved. Under presidents like Dwight D. Eisenhower and even in the early years of John F. Kennedy's administration, there was much more discipline and discretion. During this period, the CIA was involved in operations in Iran and Guatemala, but the public was largely unaware of these actions, as those who knew about them remained silent. In May 1953, Allen Dulles organized Operation Ajax, the first of many CIA-led coups. In Tehran, Iranian Prime Minister Mohammad Mossadegh had decided to nationalize the Anglo-Iranian Oil Company. In response, the British government imposed an international embargo against Iran, plunging the country into chaos. However, the Anglo-Saxon oil companies that had left Iran believed this measure was insufficient and pressured the British Prime Minister to seek help from President Eisenhower to remove Mossadegh from power. Dulles orchestrated Mossadegh's overthrow and the return to power of the young Shah, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, who ruled Iran until his own downfall 25 years later. This was not a flawlessly executed coup but rather a series of improvised actions. Yet, the British Petroleum Company was behind it all. The British Prime Minister met with Eisenhower and explained that they were at risk of losing the oil fields, which were as essential to them as the oil fields in Saudi Arabia were to the Americans. The U.S. intervened in Iran under these circumstances. Prime Minister Harold Macmillan practically forced Eisenhower and Dulles to take control of the city.
When the British met with Eisenhower, the argument that ultimately convinced the American president was not the promise that the U.S. would receive a share of Iran's oil once things returned to normal. Instead, it was the fear that Mossadegh was losing power to the communists, which could lead to the Soviet Union establishing a foothold in Iran, just as it had done in China. Eisenhower did not want to be the one to explain how Iran was lost under his watch. In the case of Mossadegh, there was a formal procedure. The plan was organized around the idea that Mossadegh was an irrational leader and a poor statesman. The communists were gaining ground, and Mossadegh had no power or ability to change the situation. The CIA believed it was necessary to intervene to save Iran from the Soviet threat. Mossadegh was perceived as a communist, and there was no doubt in the minds of the CIA and U.S. officials that removing him was the right decision. They believed that if Mossadegh remained in power, Iran would likely fall to a socialist or communist government, which was unacceptable. However, they also knew they could not engage in a full-scale war in Iran, as they had in Korea. Therefore, a covert operation led by the CIA was seen as the least costly solution. Dulles, who had just taken over as CIA director, was given the mission to act, and he did so, believing that the least expensive way to demonstrate American power was by overthrowing a few governments, with the CIA doing the job. The success of this operation led them to believe they should replicate this strategy elsewhere.